A wave of attacks on foreigners in South Africa has left at least 22 dead. Are immigrants being scapegoated by South Africa's poor for their economic woes? Or is this an extension of the widespread crime that is silently killing the country's people? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Garda. Anger against immigrants in South Africa has reached boiling point in the country's poor townships. A wave of violence against them over the weekend left dozens of people dead, hundreds injured, and even more homeless. Many immigrants have been forced out of their homes and are seeking shelter elsewhere. Some communities have come together and taken to patrolling their neighborhoods in order to maintain security amid this spasm of looting, burning, rape, and killing. Bethan Howe reports.
Smoking townships in Johannesburg. As the fires die down, residents had hoped for signs that over a week of unrest was beginning to subside. But renewed violence has put an end to such optimism, despite claims by South African President Thabo Mbeki that police can end the spate of attacks against foreigners that's seen at least 24 killed and many more injured and displaced. The country has some of the highest violent crime rates in the world. And as people continue to live in a cycle of poverty, many are searching for answers and looking for someone to blame. Vigilante groups began attacking foreign nationals on the 11th of May in reaction to rumours that immigrants were behind recent robberies in the Alexandra district of Johannesburg. South Africa has the continent's fastest growing economy. But despite post-apartheid promises by the government, little has been achieved and most people still face economic difficulties. 14 years after apartheid ended, many living in townships frequently find themselves without power or running water. 10% of South Africa's 49 million population is made up of immigrants, with the vast majority from Zimbabwe fleeing Robert Mugabe's regime. Unofficial estimates go as far as to put 40% of South Africans as unemployed, and many blame such foreigners for taking their jobs.
I'm very happy to go back home, but I know Mugabe is waiting for me. I know Mugabe and his ZANU-PF is waiting to kill me. I know the ruling party is waiting to kill us all. So to stay here is difficult. To go home is difficult. The world is just turning their back on us. There's no one who wants to help us in here.
Labour unions and opposition parties accuse President Mbeki's government of favouring business in South Africa, which is still white-dominated. Supporters of the ruling ANC party have taken to the streets, handing out leaflets and talking to residents in an effort to temper attitudes. The president has also announced the deployment of further police to troubled areas. Hundreds of displaced immigrants are now sheltering in police stations, churches and government offices, hoping for a breakthrough that may mean they can begin to rebuild their lives in safety. Bethan Howe for Inside Story.
Well, joining us to discuss this issue are our guests in Johannesburg, Pat Craven. He's the spokesman for the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU. And on the line from Johannesburg, Nixon Nikadzino, the representative of the group Crisis Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. Craven, if I could start off with you. In your opinion, is this organized violence that definitely seems to be clearly orchestrated?
There is clearly an element of organization. It didn't simply happen spontaneously, but so far there's no organization that has identified itself as being responsible. And that is the one small comfort from what is a very bad situation, that all the political parties, trade unions, community groups, church groups, and the government have condemned the outbreak of xenophobic attacks on foreigners. And that's about the only crumb of comfort. But it's still important to address the underlying issues which appear to have caused this to happen and has provided the basis on which people could, if they wished, intervene on a political basis to stir up to stir up anger against foreigners. And that is the huge problems of poverty and unemployment, the lack of housing, the slow pace of service delivery, which has obviously been angering people over many years. And some issue, and we don't know what it was, has suddenly brought it to the surface, and has then been exploited by criminal elements who've been using the unrest as a cover for straightforward acts of criminal activity, raping women, looting shops, and generally causing chaos and disruption.
Yes, we hope to explore these root causes in great depth throughout this program. Nixon Nikadzino on the phone from Johannesburg. How much credibility do you think is there to these xenophobic accusations that foreigners are taking South African jobs and are behind much of the crime?
One, obviously, you cannot be a criminal by citizenship or by nationality. A criminal is a criminal, whether he's South African or whether he's Zimbabwean. So that argument falls out on that basis. But in terms of the issue of unemployment, like what Patrick Craven is saying, this is a government, a national problem that has been in existence since 1996 and even before, whereby the government has been trying to create as many jobs as possible. But also the issue to do with education itself, trying to make sure that most of the locals are able to accept or take up certain jobs. But one thing that is shocking is that if you want to really analyze what is happening, the jobs that foreigners really do are jobs like being a cobbler, that is repairing shoes, being a construction aide, being a restaurant waiter or waitress. Many are jobs that most of the people might not be interested in, and these people are paid peanuts for that. I can tell you that I have no Zimbabweans who walk from as far as Berea to Sandton just to work in a restaurant, because if that person doesn't work, you won't be able to pay his rent at the end of the month. So I think this thing started as a xenophobic attack, but literally transformed itself into some criminal activities, whereby there were individuals who took advantage of that. If you go to Tembisa, where I've been, you can actually be a testimony to what I'm saying about the level of criminality and the level of violence that has gone beyond the issue of xenophobia.
Yes, you mentioned that people are paid peanuts and they would do anything to take a job. How much of a factor do you think, or would you say, is the economic crisis in Zimbabwe itself to this influx of Zimbabweans who will stay in South Africa, whatever the cost, Mr. Nikadzino?
The main reason why Zimbabweans are in South Africa, or the main reason why Zimbabweans are in Botswana, the same reason why Zimbabweans are in Zambia, is based on the fact that there is a political crisis that we all understand that has transformed itself into economic crisis. So you find an illegitimate regime in Zimbabwe that is misgoverning the country, a regime that is corrupt, a regime that does not respect physical policies, a regime that does not respect rudimentary economic theories and principles, and thereby catapulting into what we now see as the worst economic crisis in Africa. So a person who is here in South Africa or in Botswana as a result of the economic crisis is a political victim, because this economic crisis is emanating from the illegitimacy, the misgovernance issue, and the lack of rule of law and the corruption that we find our government in today in Zimbabwe. Pat
Craven, do you think that xenophobia starts at the very top? Home Affairs in South Africa is hardly seemed to have been a welcoming organization towards those looking for asylum, for refugee status. And of course, South African police have regularly been accused of being heavy-handed on immigrants, on foreign immigrants in South Africa in places like Hillbrow, Yeovil. So do you think that this xenophobia actually starts at the very top?
Unfortunately, yes. The Home Affairs has a very poor record in processing applications for refugee status. which the majority of people coming from Zimbabwe deserve, because clearly, as your other guest says, they're fleeing from an intolerable situation, both politically and economically, in their own country. And the police, yes, they too have overreacted. There was one notorious case a few months ago where the police invaded a church where many Zimbabweans had taken shelter, allegedly looking for illegal immigrants, but in fact indiscriminately picking up people regardless of their status. And clearly it was an act of intimidation. And we hope that this will be dealt with severely, because we clearly need the police to support the people who are under attack at the moment, and certainly don't want them to have additional problems with the police themselves.
Yes, it's a catch-22 situation maybe, isn't it? Because if you're illegal, if you haven't been able to get the proper papers to stay in South Africa and you want to go to safety, you're told to go to the police, but if you go to the police, you might be deported, whereas you actually want to stay in the country to make money. So is it a catch-22 for these foreigners?
Well, that was certainly the way many of them saw it. But fortunately, since this latest outbreak of violence occurred, the government has made it quite clear that they're not going to deport people who seek refuge in police stations, churches or other government buildings. And we will certainly try to hold them to that, there should be absolutely no question of people being afraid to seek help when they so desperately need it. And we will insist that the government applies that principle which it has pronounced.
All right, gentlemen, stay with us. It's time for a short break. When we come back, we take a closer look at South Africa's inner problems and their impact on the latest violence. Do stay with us.